like to call to order the March 6th meeting of Marin Clean Energy. Tama Conley is not with us, so I'm in charge, so watch out. So welcome, everybody. Any board announcements from board members? No? Seeing none. Public open time. Anyone from the public want to talk about matters not on our agenda? Seeing none. Dawn, report from Executive Office.
Great. Yeah, I have just a couple of items this evening. I wanted to let folks know that there have been 23 conforming bids in our open season process. We closed the open season process on March 3rd, which was Monday, and we were looking for bids for renewable power based in California. We do this open season process every year, as many of you know, and it's really exciting to see 23 conforming bids. We had 3 non-conforming bids, but for the most part, they all looked really good. The quality of the bids has increased, I would say, since years past, and the prices in the bids have come down in a pretty significant way. So those are 2 great things to have happen in the open season process, and we're just beginning to go through the evaluative process right now with those bids, and later in the agenda this evening we'll be setting up an ad hoc contracts committee to talk with staff and our technical team about the next steps on the open season bids. So that's the first item. The next item is I wanted to make sure the board was aware that PG&E is going to be increasing their rates on May 1st, and we're actually going to talk a little bit more about that in the communications item this evening, because it relates a little bit to the rate comparisons that we discussed in our rate setting item last meeting, and we'll be concluding the rate setting process at our next board meeting. So just wanted you all to be aware that that rate change is going to be going into effect. We were anticipating that this would occur as early as May, and we're pleased to see that it'll be happening at that, in that time frame. The reason for the rate change is there have been deferred greenhouse gas costs that have not been incorporated into the PG&E rate structure that they've been able to defer for over a year now. Those GHG costs are showing up in our rates, however. So there's been kind of a competitiveness issue with these GHG costs, and we're pleased to see that there will now be parity for our customers and PG&E's customers starting on May 1. We will hear more about that from Jamie in the communications item. And then the last item is just a little advertisement for our TechCom meeting, which is coming up on Monday. We have a couple of interesting presentations. We're going to be hearing from Styon, which is a US-based solar PV manufacturer. They do thin film technology that's achieved some very high efficiencies of late, and we're really excited to hear from them. We're also going to be talking about the shared solar program that we discussed last month. It's getting much more concrete, and we think we have a name and an initial timeline to get the program launched as early as this spring. So we'll be talking about that in TechCom, and it will likely come to the full board in April. That's it for my report.
Super. So Don, let me ask, on the 23 open season bids, how does that number compare to the number of bids we've gotten in the past years? Do you recall?
Yeah, actually last year we received between 20 and 25. I don't remember if it was exactly 23, but it was right around there. The difference is that last year we did not require a deposit for shortlisted candidates, and as a result, the bids that we got were not as high quality as we saw this year. This year we are requiring a deposit from any bidder that is shortlisted, and that conforms to what we see in the market from other utilities that are going through bid processes. So incorporating that, I think, is helpful. We also went through a pretty substantial overhaul of our standard form power purchase agreement, and one of the requirements in the open season was that bidders either agree to accept the terms of the PPA, the power purchase agreement, or that they submit with their bid any changes that they plan to propose in the negotiation process. And so that's a great way to streamline the negotiation process and to allow us to determine upfront which counterparties are going to be able to conform to our requirements. So that also has resulted in a higher quality of the bids that we received.
Super, great. Any other questions for Don? No, seeing none. The next item on our agenda is the consent calendar, and we have, apart from the board minutes of the monthly budget report, we have a long number of contracts, and I thought it might be helpful if Dawn would just give us a brief, like one-sentence description of what contracts are on consent, and then people can decide if they want to pull anything for further discussion or not. So, Dawn.
Great, yeah, I'm happy to do that. So, as is common in March of every year, we have a long list of contract adjustments and renewals, and the timing is because of the ending of our fiscal year, which comes at the end of this month, and April 1 is the start of our new fiscal year. So many of the vendors that we work with throughout the course of the year are set up on contracts that terminate at the end of the fiscal year and then need to be renewed if we want to continue working with them. So I'll just run quickly through the different vendors that we have here. The first contract addendum, this is C4 with Planet Ecosystems. This one actually is not an addition of a dollar amount. We're simply extending the time of our agreement with Planet Ecosystems to give them an additional month to complete a few of the tasks in their scope, and also to allow us to see some of the metrics that will be coming out of their work. We do anticipate coming to the board next month for an extension of both a dollar amount and adding to the scope a bit for the next phase of the project. But we wanted to wait one more month because we still have results coming in and metrics that we want to look at. The next item, Braun, Blazing, McLaughlin and Smith. This is a firm, some of you may be familiar with Scott Blazing, who is an attorney that we've worked with in the past and has helped many of the fledgling CCA efforts across the state. His firm is going to be helping us with some of the regulatory work that we're doing at the CPUC in Beth's absence, and he's particularly going to be helping us on the LTPP with regard to the PCIA. Sorry, I just realized I used a whole bunch of acronyms. So let me say that again. The long-term, there's a proceeding at the CPUC that involves how PG&E is spending money and what rates, how they're going to procure power into the long term. So long-term power procurement is the LTPP. One of the subjects that comes up as part of this very detailed proceeding is the departing load charge that is assigned to our customers, the PCIA. Or the power cost and difference adjustment. This is a charge that we're really concerned about and is one of our highest regulatory priorities this year. So we'll be engaged in the LTPP to try and make some changes to how the PCIA is assigned. Our primary goal is to get it to phase out over somewhere between a 1 and a 4 year period. That's what we'll be pushing for, and we have some other ideas on adjustments that can be made to decrease the impact and the burden there. So that's what this firm will be doing for us. Item C6 is the agreement with Douglas Lidell. We've worked with Dan Douglas since our launch as a regulatory council. This contract amount has diminished a bit as we're starting to rely on other counsel with a little bit more specialty. Dan Douglas provides great work in the DA or direct access markets and helps us with proceedings that where we have shared interests with the DA providers. The next agreement is with Ellison, Schneider and Harris. This is a firm that is helping us again with regulatory work at the CPUC. They provide support that's more of a technical nature. They will be participating a bit on the LTPP as well, but providing more technical support on that. And they'll also be participating in some other regulatory proceedings in Beth's absence. The agreement with Richards, Watson, Bertrand, C8 is for municipal counsel. This is Greg Stepanisic, who's been providing municipal counsel to us since the beginning. He's the one that's expert on the Brown Act and kind of the basic functions of us as a local government agency. We'll be needing to continue using his services a little bit. Again, his support has diminished quite a bit over the last few years as we've begun to rely more on in-house counsel, particularly Beth, but Greg is going to be continuing to provide some support as needed throughout the course of the next fiscal year. Item C9 with Troutman Sanders. This is a new firm that we just began working with late last year. They're providing transaction support to us, legal support to us us for our power purchase agreements. We actually found this vendor through Sonoma Clean Power. They used this company in negotiating their PPA for power, both of their PPAs for power, which were pretty complex. And the person we're working with at this firm, Stephen Hall, is just really one of the best transactional attorneys I've ever worked with, and we're really so excited to have found him. He's helped us with the revamp of our power purchase agreement that was part of our open season process. And we're really excited about having access to his services over the next year as we negotiate any new power supply agreements. You will also provide support as needed if we have to do any fine-tuning or adjustments to agreements that are already in place with our existing providers. Item C10, agreement with J. Marshall. J. Marshall has been providing IT support to us for quite a few years, and he handles our computers, telephones, and all the basic IT items that we have in our office. And it's a relatively small contract, but he provides a lot of good day-to-day maintenance and operational support as needed. He also has helped with getting our server transitioned and helping us to grow when we've needed more space and more security. So he'll be working with us on all of those things. Item C11, our agreement with Maher Accountancy. Maher Accountancy has been providing our accountancy services for many years. We've increased their scope a couple of years in a row now. They're now providing support even with payroll and accruals. But also the bulk of what they do is making sure that invoices are processed timely. There's a lot of attention to detail, and also providing proper controls so that we don't have just folks on the staff side doing approvals, but we have an external firm making sure that the right contract is in place before invoices are processed, raising questions when needed, making sure that we're not missing anything. They also help coordinate our external audit through a third party. The next item, C12, agreement with Civic Actions. This is a company that is going to be helping us for a final piece. They've been with us now for a couple of years, helping with some of the forms that we have up on our website. Our Deep Green sign-up form, for example, is one. We are going to be transitioning to a new platform, which you can see down here at the end here. Marin Web Design is going to be taking on some of the work, but Civic Actions is going to be assisting with some final pieces that we need them to wrap up before we transition. The next item is with Green Ideals. This is a marketing company that's been assisting us for a couple of years now. They provide support to our communications director, Jamie, with marketing, particularly graphic design and that sort of thing. And then our last item is Marin Web Design. This is a new company that we just started working with early in the year under a small contract. We want to expand the contract because we want to really make a transition for our website into a new platform that makes it easier for us to update in-house, allows a lot more flexibility and simplicity with the way the website is structured and operates. So that's a quick summary. Sorry it was not as quick as I hoped, but that's the overview of the item on the consent calendar as far as contracts go.
Great, thank you, John. Yeah, any item that any board member would like to discuss further or questions for?
Yeah, just with Trout and Sanders, their fees are way the heck above everybody else's. They're up in the $6.75 an hour department rather than $3.50 or $3.75. So could you talk a little bit about what, in your view, justifies those kind of fees?
Yes, absolutely. And I should start by saying that we have seen those fees before when we've worked with other transaction attorneys in the power supply industry. The first company that we worked with is Milbank. They're based in New York, but they had an office in California. We worked with an excellent attorney there, but we saw fees, believe it or not, even higher, about 30% higher than that. He was a very senior attorney there, but that is what we needed when we were starting because it was a very complex, some very complex contracting that was needed. The dollar amounts that we see for transaction attorneys tend to be in that higher range. We have seen they are applying a 10% discount to us as a public agency. The same discount was applied in Sonoma County, and we're glad they've extended that here. But I guess the best answer to that is that it is what we see in the market for that type of support. And the good news is that it's very high quality. We have seen rates, not quite that high, but very close for work that has not been anywhere close to as good.
Yeah.
And I think that the value of, just for example, having our PPA really whipped into shape is going to pay off for us quite a bit in the long term, and is probably worth the upfront investment in time, and will allow us to not have to go back and fix things in the future because of the attention to detail and the expertise that's involved.
So the dollar amounts go with the territory.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Move approval?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, consent calendar is approved. Our next item 5 is a budget adjustment for fiscal year 2013-14. Great, it's yours, huh?
This is basically dealing with two small changes to the budget. One is moving around some funds internally in the existing budget, and one is a slight 1.7% increase to one of the line items. The cost of energy is a little bit higher than we had initially predicted. This stems partly from the fact that we had a higher rate of enrollment in Richmond than we had anticipated. So the costs that are associated with that, such as the spot price of energy on the open market, and also just the costs that go along with higher costs of renewables, mean that we do have to up that line item by about 1.5 or 1.7%, which translates to maybe 1.3 million. And that is just an increase in the expense. Additionally, we have a slightly higher, the staffing budget looks to be a little bit higher than initial expectations, due partly to cost of living increases for the staff, but also because we have brought on a few employees sooner than we had anticipated. So this calls for a small increase in the budget, about 20,000, which is offset by some wiggle room that we had in other line items. Additionally, because we're bringing on new employees, we will need new computers, desks for them to sit at, so that will increase our general and admin a little bit as well. But again, the cost of staffing in G&A are all just moving around funds internally in the existing budget, and there's only going to be that small increase in the overall budget because of the cost of energy.
So Greg, I had a question for you. I understand on the staffing, it's a $20,000 increase, which is not a tremendous amount, but I did find it perplexing that the $20,000 increase was due in part to COLA increases, cost of living increases, which I would think is something that would be predictable in advance of the fiscal year.
It is just in combination with both the cost of living increase and the new staffing, so it was just a little bit more.
But going forward in next year's budget, I assume we'll factor in the expected cost of living
It
increases.
is already factored in, yes.
So we won't be surprised by that next time?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you actually look at the next item, you see that it does go up a little.
Super,
It
great,
does.
thank you. Yes, Tom?
It says, an adjustment is being proposed for specific line items, including adjustments that reflect actual electricity consumption that deviates slightly from the initial projections. So if the cost of electricity goes up due to additional consumption, why wouldn't the revenue go up along with it?
That's because that was something that I would like to actually point towards John, but
I can respond to that as well. Yeah, no problem. So what happened in the last fiscal year is that we projected a higher opt-out rate in Richmond than we actually saw. We were projecting a 30% opt-out rate, and what we saw was closer to 20% or a little bit less than that. So we have more customers than we expected. Yeah, hooray. So
Yay.
that's great. That's a good problem to have. So what that means is that we place a hedge for power supply through power supply contracts at about 90%, and then we have, actually it's a little higher than that, and then we buy at the CAISO rate anything that goes above what we've hedged out. So when we have more customers than we anticipate, there's a little bit more unknown about the cost of the power that we're buying for that margin, for that incremental margin. And so based on what the actual costs have been to serve that additional load, it's been a little bit higher than we anticipated. So we do have more revenue coming in, but not quite as much as we need to fill that small variable. I think the other thing that's important to note, though, is that going forward, and as we discussed in the rate setting item last month, it's really not possible to know with a precise level of certainty how much energy customers are going to use on an annual basis. We can look at historical figures to make a very good projection, but there are always going to be things that cause changes. Weather can cause big changes, for example, and the cost of power also, we can't predict that with certainty. So that's why we build in a reserve every year to cover for fluctuations that can happen. What we saw this year was not unusual. What we saw was actually less than a 2% variation in the overall cost of energy that was projected, which is pretty small when you consider the number of variables that go into the forecasting.
Great. Any other questions from the board? Yes.
So consequently, the reserve amount that was budgeted will be correspondingly low by $1.3 million.
Exactly.
Any other questions from the board? Anyone from the public who'd like to comment on this item? Seeing none. Anyone like to move to approve the budget adjustment for this fiscal year?
I'd like to move it to approval.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? That's approved. All right, so continuing on with our budget, next item is the budget for fiscal year 2014-15.
This is pretty much the same information that you looked at last month. There have been no major changes to the proposed budget. However, we do have, it was requested last time that we get a little bit more detail for the marketing budget. So if you look on the back of your handout, you will find a slight breakdown of the expenses of marketing for both this financial year and the coming financial year. And so it's basically just signing off on what was proposed last time, that no issues were brought up with at that time.
Has there been any change in the estimate of the cost of energy, which seems to me that it must be a sort of a challenging tea leaves reading endeavor?
There has been no change so far.
And the reason why is that we have contracts in place for all of the supply for the coming year. So we actually do know with certainty what the price of power will be, at least for the amount that we've hedged out. It's the small remainder at the top that we can predict, but we have good estimates for that.
Super. That's helpful. And I wondered if you could talk, I'm sure we talked about the last time we had this item before the board, but I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the local renewable energy development fund and just remind all of us what that is.
Yeah,
At least
love
me.
to talk about that. Yeah. So last, I guess it was last summer, your board made a decision to take half of all deep green revenue that we receive and put it into a local renewable development fund to use for pre-development costs of local build-out that we want to build and own. So we haven't yet built anything that we plan to own, although we do have some buyout provisions in some of our power purchase agreements. But the idea with this fund is to build something here locally, and we've already begun, the first year, the amount that was collected, the 50% of deep green revenue, was about $50,000. This next year, because of our customer growth, we're projecting $109,000 to go into that pre-development fund. And so those dollars really are set aside, and you can see them in the budget. They're really separated out in a totally separate section. And we will be using that for pre-development costs. And what are pre-development costs? Well, that they include engineering that needs to be done to look at a site, evaluate it. There is some cost associated with applying for an interconnection permit with PG&E. And then there are some costs associated with finding vendors to buy panels from, and probably one of the bigger expenses is legal, transactional expenses with getting documents in place. So those funds are earmarked for that process, and we've made it partway through the process of getting a site pinned down for our first local development project that we would own. The site that has kind of surfaced to the top as being the best opportunity for our local project is the Richmond Port. It would be a rooftop facility on top of an existing warehouse that they have at the port. There may be an opportunity in future phases, to do some carport shade structures. They have a very large parking area that may be available in the future, but they want to start with the rooftop of their warehouse. And we're in negotiations right now with the City of Richmond. The port is part of the City of Richmond regarding a land lease or a roof lease, as it were. And as we proceed through that process, we'll keep you all posted. But once we've concluded that process, we'll be able to apply for an interconnection with PG&E. We have to be able to demonstrate that we own, that we have a right to the land in order to apply for interconnection. So that's the status of the project. That's what the money is earmarked for. And because we may have more dollars than we need for just one site, we expect to start looking for another site probably within the next year and a half, so that we can continue to build more with that local development.
Terrific, great, thank you, Dom. Yes, please.
Just one follow-up question. Just on the chart that shows the revenue and the expenditures associated with the fund, it nets out to zero. Does that mean that on an annual basis, all the money that's allocated to the fund is spent?
That is, that's what is proposed. Depending on timing, that may not actually happen. So we'll need to do some type of rollover if we're not able to keep that project progressing. But that is the goal.
The goal is to net it out on an annual basis. Okay.
Thank you, Tom. My only other question of the moment is really for you, Jamie. One of the other big changes here in this fiscal year going forward is how much more money we propose to spend on advertisements as opposed to the decline in what we're spending on printing and mailing. And I'm assuming this is because we're in the great position of having Richmond signed on. We don't need to do our opt-out notices and whatnot, and so we're reusing that money.
Yes.
That might have been spent in that way for a different kind of advertising campaign.
Correct.
Is that fair?
So we're definitely reducing our print and mail costs significantly because we're not planning on doing any sort of intense opt-out noticing this year. We're also planning on offering all of our customers options for receiving any notices that we send in the mail, like power content or cost comparisons or deep green mailers, electronically as well. It's hard to say how much of an uptake we'll have in that, but we'll be promoting that on all of our materials, so hopefully we'll also reduce the mailers that way. And then we want to increase our advertising for a couple of reasons. One, because we're not doing an enrollment in a community, a planned enrollment this year, we can focus an advertising campaign throughout our service area, so it can be a more extensive campaign, which means more advertisements in different papers. We can consider bus ads and things like that again, but most significantly, or maybe the biggest change this year, is the potential for television with the video ads. So we are in the process of wrapping up our first 4 videos with micro documentaries, which was a contract that you guys approved. I believe that was in December. And so I'm excited to share those with you. They're going really well, and I think they'll be well received. They're great informational about us and details of our program, hearing from our customers what we're doing with energy efficiency. And so we can circulate those on local TV spots as well.
Great, super. I don't want to preempt the communications update that I know is
I'm not
coming
getting
later.
into that
Yeah,
today,
right.
so I'm glad to tell you now.
Great, super. Any other questions from the board? Anyone from the public who'd like to comment on this? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
And a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, All right, the budget is approved. And our next item is the Ad hoc Contracts Committee for 2014.
Great. And we just passed around for y'all to use as a reference point what our current membership is on each of our committees, just as a refresher. Did those get passed around?
I think it hasn't gotten just a second. Hold on.
Okay. Where did they end?
It stopped.
That was the government works.
Emma got so interested, he had to keep all of them.
No worries, and it's not really an essential document, but it might be a useful point of reference. We have a number of committees, and from time to time, we need to form an ad hoc committee for a specific purpose. So early this year, we had an ad hoc rate setting committee that assisted us with some of the early discussions around forming the rates that were eventually proposed to the board last month. We now have a need to form an ad hoc contracts committee that's related to the 2014 open season process. Some board members have expressed an interest to me in being involved in contract discussions and anything that is more of a technical nature. And so I reached out to many of you that had expressed those sorts of interests. And I have to say that this is the strongest level of interest we've ever had on this committee, and I'm so delighted we actually have 6 folks that have thrown their name in the ring to be part of this committee. Usually we kind of limp along with 3. I think once we even had to do 2. But anyway, it's really exciting to have so much enthusiasm. I think the challenging part will be finding a time to meet that works for 6 people. But I know we can do it. And, so what's been passed around to you here are the list of folks that I've spoken to about this, with one exception. Director Lyon and I were trading voicemails and didn't actually connect until just before the meeting, but he has confirmed that he's interested in being on the committee as well. So if others of you are interested, you can speak now and maybe arm wrestle for a seat on this exciting committee. We can't get bigger than 6 for quorum reasons or Brown Act reasons. But at this point, the folks that have expressed interest are Director Sears, Director O'Donnell, Director McCaskill, Director Haroff, Director Bailey, and Director Lyon.
So, but we can't have 6, you said?
We can
Oh, we
have
can,
6.
okay, good.
We can't have 7.
We can't have 7.
Right.
Good. And could I come back up to the technical committee for a minute? Because, we had shrunk that committee down to 5 because we were having some quorum challenges, but now we have an additional board member, Kevin, who's interested in joining the committee. So I'm thinking maybe it's an opportune moment to increase back to 6.
Yeah, I
What do
think
you
that's
think?
a wonderful suggestion. I wonder though, if we actually didn't notice that on the agenda, so we might need to wait until next month to do that.
Oh, darn.
Yeah, that would have been a good thing to do.
It was worth a
this
try.
month.
But you're welcome to come Monday
You can
anyway.
still sit in.
We do it on an emergency basis. That's allowed.
That's right. No, you can sit in on Monday and see if you really
We
like
don't,
it.
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
vote.
That's a
Maybe
good
it's a
idea.
blessing.
That's a good idea.
It's a
That's
blessing.
right.
Not many
Yeah.
votes that we actually take.
Yeah.
Great.
That would be terrific.
All right, but it would be good if we took action on the ad hoc contracts committee. So when everyone's seeing their name in print, does that change your interest in being in the ad hoc committee?
I'd just like to make one correction. I think it was January 2014 there under the ad hoc rate setting
Thank you.
committee.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Excellent.
All righty. So, hearing no one who wants to bow out of the committee, I guess I would ask for a motion approving the creation of the committee and the members who are on it.
So move.
So I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, excellent. That's terrific. Thank you, everybody, for volunteering to be on these committees. All right, item 8. Jamie, it's time for the communications update.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to start out today, which is giving an update on what's going on with CCAs around California. There's obviously been a lot of movement over the last few months, and it's really exciting. As we know, Sonoma Clean Power is launching service in May. Things are going well there. They've started sending out opt-out notices. They're getting enrollments for their 100% renewable program, which they're calling Evergreen. And we are keeping close tabs on everything that's going on in Sonoma, and we're excited for their launch in May. We started the feasibility study for the County of Napa. Our technical team is working away on that right now. It looks like the County of Napa has about 16,000 electric customers that potentially could be added to our load. I also wanted to let you know that the City of Albany and El Cerrito, you may remember, applied for a grant from the World Wildlife Fund. The World Wildlife Fund was offering grants to communities who were interested in exploring CCAs, and it was to help fund feasibility studies. So we have already received a letter of interest from the City of Albany. We'll be meeting with their staff likely next week to talk about next steps. That grant was applied jointly between the City of Albany and El Cerrito. We've also had meetings with the City of El Cerrito staff, so it's likely that we'll see some next steps from El Cerrito in the next couple of weeks as well. Again, I've listed the cities around the Bay Area that we have had staff level meetings with. That would be the City of Benicia, Hayward, Piedmont, San Pablo, and San Ramon. We have a meeting coming up in the East Bay on March 24th, and it's an all-day meeting. It's going to be all about CCAs, about MCE, Sonoma Clean Power, and generally about also starting up CCAs in our own communities and what that takes. So the audience will be mostly city staff, supervisors, and council members throughout the East Bay who are being invited. So that should be an interesting meeting with a lot of information sharing. I believe that's the local Clean Energy Alliance. Clean Energy US is also, I think, co-hosting that meeting. We haven't had any recent conversations with the city or county of San Luis Obispo, but we have been invited to speak at the National Association of Counties Sustainability Forum in Santa Barbara County. That's going to be held later on in March, so there will be city staff and officials, county staff and officials throughout the United States at that meeting, and CCA will be one of the topics that they're interested in addressing. One community meeting that I wanted to highlight was earlier this week in South Silicon Valley. It was a really fruitful meeting. There were about 50 attendees there from all kinds of big businesses in Silicon Valley. There were also representatives from the City of San Jose, Sunnyvale, and Mountain View. They're interested in exploring CCA, their own CCA, and so they heard from us about what we've done in Marin and use that as a case study to answer questions and really gain support from the business community. Any questions about expansion before I move on? All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a campaign that we launched today for Deep Green in honor of Earth Day. We did a campaign that was very similar to this in 2012. And what we've done is we've partnered with 7 local nonprofits in our service area, so throughout Marin and Richmond. They are listed there, those 7 nonprofits, and they are going to basically reach out to their friends and network and encourage them to sign up for Deep Green to support local economic growth through our Deep Green Renewable Development Fund and also in the environmental benefits in honor of Earth Day. And so between now and Earth Day, which is April 22nd, anyone who signs up for Deep Green on our website or who calls us, our call center to sign up, can vote for one of these nonprofits. And so hopefully all these nonprofits are going to be working like mad to get people to sign up. When we did this in the past, we saw a really big boost in Deep Green enrollment, so we're excited about this. And at the end, we're going to donate $1,000 to the nonprofits with the most votes, and second and third place will receive $500 each. So we've updated our website, our call centers are prepared, and we've created print materials for those organizations to distribute, as well as graphics that they can use on their website, text that they can use in their newsletters. We'll be promoting this campaign heavily at the Earth Day Marin event, and I'll be giving you an update about the hopeful uptick in Deep Green enrollments. So shifting gears a little bit into something a little bit more technical, I wanted to talk about the rate changes that Dawn was mentioning earlier in her executive officer report. And I was just gonna start out with a little background of cap and trade, because it starts sort of the root of where it's coming from. So cap and trade came out of AB 32, and it basically sets a cap on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that big businesses can emit. So businesses have the option of either meeting that cap or being below it, and if they're going to exceed it, then they are required to buy permits, which are called greenhouse gas allowances, from the state, which allow them to go over that cap. The cap reduces 3% every year to help achieve the goal of reducing emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. And these businesses, like the investor-owned utilities, PG&E, are able to buy the additional GHG allowances through quarterly state-run auctions. And that leads us to the climate credit. Because what the state decided was that any revenue that is generated from the auctioning off of those greenhouse gas allowances are going to be returned to customers through their electric bills. So all of the investor-owned utilities throughout California are going to be issuing what we are calling climate credits on residential and commercial customer bills. So the first credit is going to show up on residential customer bills in April of this year, and then again in October, and those will occur annually through at least 2020. So every April and every October, residential customers are going to see a climate credit on the electric portion of their bill. This will show up on the electric delivery side of the bill. And they haven't actually issued the precise cost of what that credit is going to be, but for residential customers, it's looking like it's going to be somewhere around $30 per customer.
Jamie, do we know what portion of the revenue generated from the auctions is going to be directed to the climate credit?
I bet Beth does.
Okay, Beth?
That is not an easy question, actually. So the way that the revenues are being allocated is it's first going to energy intensive, trade exposed, and other entities, and sort of a residual amount is ending up with residential customers. And so it actually is was part of we've been actively involved in this proceeding, and particularly Jeremy, bless him. And so I don't know the exact percentage, and I'm actually not sure that it is known what the exact percentage is, because it is sort of this residual value.
It's small.
In comparison with the whole volume of cap and trade revenues.
It's small, right?
Smaller.
It's
yes.
smaller. It's okay. Jeremy?
If I may add just a little bit, in actuality, say our residential customers will be getting cap and trade credits or revenue in two ways. First, the credits are being passed back to ratepayers to insulate them from the increases in costs that they'll see in their electricity bills because of the cap and trade program. That's the original, I guess, idea of why they need to be sending the money back to ratepayers, back to customers, because if they tax the polluters and they don't do anything for the customers of the polluters, the customers will pay the difference. So there's a portion that directly offsets the increased costs that everyone will be seeing in their generation rates through a credit that's in the delivery portion of the bill. And that is just baked into rates, so that it's not a separate line item. Then there's also this climate credit, which Jamie is talking about, and that climate credit does not relate to how much electricity a customer uses. It's a flat credit. It's simply divided up by all the customers that are serviced by the investor-owned utilities in the state of California. And as Beth was saying, that credit is really the residual value after all these costs are offset for industry, small business, and residential. It's the remainder that then goes as just a credit to the residential community, and it's on a per account basis.
Great, thank you.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So has PUC been, I guess I'm guessing that they've already approved PG&E passing the costs of them paying for credits onto ratepayers, and then you just get a little bit back. Is that how that's working? So
Yes.
just gonna pay more if you're in PG&E.
So,
Here, actually, maybe I'll field this one.
sure.
So the way that cap and trade works is a little bit complicated insofar as it really relates to generation costs. And so those generation costs, for example, in the case of MCE, are embedded in our procurement costs. And it's the same case for PG&E as well. Now, the revenues and the auction revenues, the California Air Resources Board determined that the investor-owned utility was going to run those credits, on our behalf, on behalf of all load-serving entities within its footprint. So actually, on the cost side, the way that mechanically it worked was that they backed out an assumption of greenhouse gas costs and just sort of held off on charging customers until the methodology for determining how the credits were going to be returned to customers was going to be treated. And so this has been a really significant issue for us as a CCA because obviously we're bearing the costs already in our generation rates. PG&E had been holding off on charging those costs to customers, so their generation rate was artificially low. But now that the credits are being returned, the costs are also going to be implemented at the same time, so the generation costs are going to go up. That includes both the ongoing GHG costs of their procurement and these amounts that they had held off on charging to customers, which is going to be amortized over a 24-month period. So, welcome to the world of cap and trade.
Yeah, I actually worked on this when I
Oh,
was in the
great.
Air District, so I'm somewhat familiar
super.
with it, but I was just sort of, it's kind of classic that the polluter gets to turn these costs over to the ratepayers, any ratepayer, not just the MCE, but it's just, at some point you would hope that they could eat it out of their own profits.
That's what they call a regulated public utility.
And that's, because PUC just keeps approving it. Okay,
It's almost home.
thank you.
So now we have a cap and trade expert on that.
No, not an expert. I know a few that are experts and I'm not one of them.
Okay, so just to clarify, the residential credits are flat. All the residential customers will get the same credit. The commercial credits aren't going to be showing up until October of this year, so it'll be a while before they see theirs, and those are based on usage. So they will vary by customer. One thing that's interesting about the climate credit is that it's been determined that this is going to be an opportunity to educate people about energy efficiency programs. So on the bills with the climate credit, there's going to be a bill message along with it that says, for more information about this climate credit and how you can spend these dollars to further reduce your electric bills, visit this website. And it's going to be the same website for all utilities and all customers across California. It's actually the Energy Upgrade California website. So it will direct people to energy efficiency saving programs, which is a good, I think a good idea, and hopefully we'll see some more uptake with that as well. And then going to the next step, which we were sort of already talking about, these greenhouse gas allowance costs that PG&E has been delaying are now going to be included in their rates. So they have proposed a rate increase that will take effect on May 1st. And I wanted to bring this as an update because we've been talking about our own proposed rate increase and the cost comparisons between MCE and PG&E. So this changes things. And this is a cost comparison with MCE's proposed rates, which would take effect next month, and PG&E's proposed rates for May. And as you can see, this is for a residential customer, and our light green is a little bit cheaper than PG&E. So our residential customers will be seeing a savings, which is really great.
And that's after both of the rate increases are implemented.
Yes. And ta-da! Light green and deep green are going to actually be a savings for commercial customers in May due to PG&E's rate increase. So we're really excited about having such competitive rates. It puts us in a really good position, and we'll be happy to be telling all of our customers about that. Yes?
Did PG&E also take up the take a rate increase on the transmission costs on the bill?
They did actually change their delivery, so the electric delivery part is grayed out a little bit right there because it's the same for everyone, but there's an increase there as well.
Tom, yeah.
Are you gonna put this out in something that we can, like a press release, or you send us something that we can circulate?
Yes,
With
I
your
would
slide,
love to
with
do
your
that.
slide.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jamie? From the public want to comment? No? Great. Thank you, Jamie. All right. So, Becky, energy efficiency update.
Good evening, everybody. Prepared a pretty brief update tonight. I'm trying to just get through it and take any questions that you might have. So just to start things off for an overview, we're going to check in on the small commercial program, talk about some of the work we've done on the financing program, give a quick update on the single family program, and then talk about the upcoming project we have to continue funding post-2014. So just a quick update on the small commercial campaign. This month we are relaunching our canvassing campaign. So the way the small commercial program works is that we generally have a saturation period where we get people out into the field offering audits to businesses. They conduct a bunch of audits all at once, schedule a bunch of project work after that, and then come back through, do quality assurance, and pay rebates at the end. So we are now, after ramping down a little bit through the winter time frame, we're now picking the campaign back up again. So for the last couple of days, we started our work in Mill Valley. And coming up on the 17th, we'll be launching our campaign again in the city of Richmond and also moving into Central Marin when we finish Mill Valley. One of the things that we did this time around for the small commercial program that has so far been pretty successful is having a revised approach to how we actually sign customers up for audits. Previously, the approach that has worked very well in the past has been to just canvass entire neighborhoods at one time, knock on doors, offer the services, and then go from there. But we have found that for a variety of factors, that's really started to decrease in conversion rates. There aren't as many people who are accepting the audits when you're knocking on their doors. We think that's due in part to decreased incentives. There have been certain technology changes as a result of code increases that make it harder to capture low-hanging fruit right in the door, make it less of an attractive proposition to the business owners. Another thing I think that we may be seeing is that there is some saturation that's happening. We'll go to a business, do a preliminary assessment of the lighting and find that a lot of people have already captured some of the easy-to-get things, which makes it hard to get back in and do a little more. As a result, what we're trying now is developing a list of customers who live in, or who are operating in the areas we'd like to visit, and pre-calling them in advance, letting them know about the opportunity, letting them know about the benefits, trying to get a hold of decision makers right away instead of necessarily talking to a counterstaff person. And already that has been proven to increase the efficiency of the campaign by about 3 days. So that's 3 less days that we have to have people in the staff trying to sign up for audits. And I believe that we'll also see a higher conversion rate because my guess is that these people will be more interested in actually getting the audit. So it'll be exciting to see how that works in Mill Valley and Central Marin in the city of Richmond. The plan now is to run this campaign through up until June. We anticipate that in June, as a result of the Title 24 increase in standard efficiency that's going to have an impact in July actually, there will probably be a large push of projects right before that code goes into effect. Some people trying to get in under the wire. And then the final thing is that we have made some changes to our incentive structure as well to try and increase the value proposition to the customers. One of the things that we found was that there were not a lot of customers who were taking advantage of the whole building program offerings that we were bringing to the table. We think this is a variety of factors. For one thing, when you're showing up and knocking on somebody's door with a cold call, they aren't as familiar with the concept, and you don't know, what opportunity is there. Calling in advance gives us the opportunity to really know what the customer has done, know what opportunity and what appetite they may have to do more. In addition to that, we have started to offer a bonus incentive depending on how many measures you install. So if you install just lighting, you get the basic rate incentive. If you install lighting in an HVAC measure, then you get a slight kick. If you install lighting, HVAC, and refrigeration, you get another kick. And then if you do building envelope, you get another kick. So it's really intended to help incentivize these deeper retrofits and getting as much as you can when you touch a building once. So we're hopeful to see an uptick in multi-measure projects with the result of that change. One other thing that we're trying that I'm really excited to see how it works, there's something called the split incentive. That's the situation where you have a landlord who owns the equipment and who owns the property, and a tenant who's actually the one paying the utility bills. In this situation, the landlord has no incentive to increase the efficiency of the equipment because they're not paying for the utility bills. But the tenant who pays for the utility bills doesn't often have the ability or the control to change out the equipment. And so it's something that we call a split incentive. It's also very common in the multifamily sector. You see it both in small commercial and in multifamily. And what that means is that you have a hard time when you approach a business, especially with a cold call, you're often talking to someone who doesn't have the ability to make operational decisions about the property. So what we're trying to do is create an incentive for property managers to refer multiple properties within their area. And if they refer up to 3 properties within their area, we'll give them $250 on top of each project. So we're hoping that this can help overcome some of those financial disincentives and also make sure that we have engaged decision makers who are willing to drink the Kool-Aid and get engaged in the program.
Becky, can I ask you a question? Since
Yeah.
you're starting out in Mill Valley, are you looking at single standalone small businesses there? Are you also looking at the Strawberry Shopping Center, which is part of the Mill Valley zip code?
Yeah.
You're doing
So
whatever's
both,
out there, both?
Both. The
Yeah.
strategy that they take when they go out into the field is that they look first at places that are geographically indexed. So like the Strawberry Shopping Center would be like one day that they would like try and call the tenants in that facility or call the property managers and try and get scheduled in that day. And then the next day they would go down like the main corridor, like the commercial corridor.
Got it.
So that's the idea, is to help increase the efficiency of being out in the field.
Got it, thank you.
So there's some financing program updates as well. Jamie, myself, Megan, a few other people have been working really hard to get a marketing campaign out for our Green Home Loans program. We're also working with the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, including Dana Armanino of the county, who's doing a lot of work locally for the single family rebate program, which is a complement to our financing program. And we're working closely with First Community Bank, who is our banking partner on this program as well. We've been having a lot of meetings, working through identifying our target market, trying to figure out what are resonant messages with these target markets, what are the kind of media channels that they generally rely upon or trust, and then moving from there to actually developing collateral and messaging. At this point, our plan is to launch this campaign middle of this month. It's mainly going to be a print campaign with some online campaign as well. There are some papers, for example, such as the Marin Independent Journal, where you can purchase a bundle, get both print ads and have targeted online advertising as well. So that's our plan. In addition to that, we are also working on compiling a list of not only outreach events in terms of things like Earth Day celebrations, but also what we're considering trusted partners. For example, Jackson's Hardware. There's a lot of local contractors who buy their materials at Jackson's Hardware. And when it comes down to it, the local contractors are the ones who know the projects are happening. They're the ones who are interfacing with the customer and can let them know about the availability of things like energy rebates and incentives. So our plan is to actually set up tables in those parking lots so that we can let the contractors know about the program that we have. Jackson's Hardware is a great one for me to talk about because we've actually been working with them since about December. They have contractor lists, we've had flyers at their counters for that time, and so it's really sort of building on a relationship that we're trying to get going. We've also tried to do this with bigger operations such as Home Depot and have run into a lot of barriers, unfortunately. They won't just work with anybody who comes in the door, they refer you to their corporate headquarters before you can find out if you can put something at like the one store in Marin. So, I mean, there's a few more stores in Marin, but nonetheless, we've run into some barriers there. So it's been really helpful to leverage our local partners as much as possible. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that we had a meeting with Adam Lentz with the City of Richmond, who we work pretty closely with as well, to talk about, there's something that Dana Armanino does here in the County of Marin that I think is a really great way to get the word out about the program. It's called the Home Showcase Rebate Program. And for anyone who actually does a home upgrade project, where they get the rebate from PG&E, they upgrade their home, it's a comprehensive building science-based program. If you want, you can get this Home Showcase rebate, and you get $1,000 to throw a party at your house. And you basically invite your neighbors, you bring them over, and you get to showcase the work that's been done. And this is a really successful model because the program is extremely complicated to understand. It's hard for people to get the value, but when they can come to your house and see the aesthetic improvements, the comfort improvements, really talk to someone who's gone through the process and get an understanding for it, those have shown to be extremely valuable opportunities in terms of getting up enrollment in the program. So we've been coordinating with Data by coming to these home showcase meetings and talking about the financing that we have available. It's a really great follow-up. And going, gosh, wow, $12,000 for that project, it looks really nice, but I don't have that kind of money. Guess what? We don't have to. We have this great financing program to help cover the upfront costs. And it's great that they're doing that in Marin, but we don't know yet that City of Richmond is on board for that. So we're talking with Adam Lenz about working together to do a similar type of thing in the City of Richmond area. Through those conversations, he also had a great suggestion that we could put information about our programs on some of the city websites. So there's like a city website for, I think, the planning department that talks about financing resources, energy rebates, and et cetera. So he has started the ball rolling to see if we can get that language on, and wanted to throw out the suggestion that if there are any other board members who are interested in greasing the skids of your planning departments, I would love to prepare a format email. We'll probably be sending it out to you, so keep an eye out. And it would be a great opportunity, I think, for us to get the word out to the program when people are first thinking about projects, when they first start to investigate permits and things like that. So the single family program update, we have some really exciting news on the Planet Ecosystems tool as well. We have been sort of griping about the user interface, the main landing page that you land on with the Planet Ecosystems page, and they've heard it. And they have actually been working recently with a very high quality design firm called MIG. It's like more Economy or something. It's an acronym of a very successful design and planning firm based out of the East Bay. And they've been working on a lot of design upgrades for the user interface. They've been working really closely with Jamie, have been super receptive to our feedback, and we think that finally we're going to be able to see something launch on Monday. And hopefully that we'll see that happen. That we're going to take a final look and make sure that everything looks and works right, and then roll it live. In addition, there's actually a marketing campaign taking place. As soon as we launch the new user interface, there will also be a marketing campaign to drive traffic to the web portal. This is a primarily online-based marketing campaign. There will be ads purchased in things like Facebook or LinkedIn, but then on top of that, there will be some Google AdWords to help drive traffic back to the portal as well. So we'll be tracking analytics and hopeful that not only the increase in advertising, but also the more attractive, easier to use interface should help not only get more traffic, but retain that traffic and get more accounts registered. So that's something that we'll be looking at throughout the next month and into April. And then also what we're hoping to see launch in the course of the next month, although it may bleed in a little bit into the month after, is a few new features on that tool. They've been working with us to develop a financing portal. And this would actually include information about all of our financing programs that we have available, and it would connect back to the person's account. So let's say you go to the Planet Ecosystems web portal, you develop an action plan, then you can click a button that says, finance this. And it will show you the terms of all the different financing programs that would apply, and it actually links to where you can apply. So we think this will be a really nice way to help close the loop and just get all the resources in the homeowner's hands. So we're hopeful that that will launch at least by April. And then the last thing I wanted to mention about the single family program is just a reminder that the schools program is currently in outreach mode. They've been sending out emails and letters to principals across the county of Marin and the city of Richmond. We're hopeful to lock some partners in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be launching our walkathon style campaign to drive more traffic back to the web portal throughout the month of April and May. Finally, the fun stuff. This is a nice segue to regulatory. The main thing that I have on my plate this month is working with the CPUC to get a funding extension request in. As a quick refresher, we talked about this a bit last month, but the Public Utilities Commission is moving in the direction of longer 10-year rolling portfolio cycles. Currently what they do is they fund energy efficiency programs for 2 to 3 years at a time. It creates a real start and stop model in the industry where you try to ramp up a program for 2 years, and then you have to stop, close everything down, reapply for funding, and then continue again. So it's really, I think, a positive move that they're moving towards this longer term. It creates better market signals for everybody who's kind of on the sidelines thinking about getting engaged in energy efficiency but not really sure what's going to happen. However, it's a lot of work to shift to such a dramatically different way of doing business. And thus, what the Public Utilities Commission did is rather than, they basically are hoping to do just a simple extension of what we currently have available for funding. So rather than having a whole new application cycle where we come up with entirely new programs and pitch entirely new everything, what they're hoping for is a 50% increase of what we're currently doing. There's the possibility for us to propose some program changes, but they've requested that it not be as part of this filing. What they want to see for this filing is just what it would look like to do a 50% increase, and then they would ask us to come back with a separate advice letter to propose changes to the portfolio. It's a little funky, but the reason that they wanted to do that is just so that they can see apples to apples comparisons of all of the different program administrator filings in one place, so they have an idea of how the goals and the funding are working out and how the cost effectiveness works out across the state. And then they'll separately vet on public record any program changes that are considered. They have allowed some flexibility with that. The Public Utilities Commission has indicated that they will consider changes to comply with Prop 39. Prop 39 passed and created a bunch of funding available to make energy efficiency improvements in schools and public buildings. And so because of that, they're willing to consider programs that work closely with Prop 39 programs. I've investigated that locally, but the county is actually doing a lot of really good work on that already. So it looks as though that's an area that is met locally. Things that we have considered are asking for more funding for financing marketing. I think this makes a lot of sense because our financing budget was almost completely credit enhancement. So that's subsidy that's sitting in a bank and will sit in a bank until it needs to be used in the case of a loan default. So it doesn't make sense to ask for more credit enhancement unless we have significant deal flow, which we're not seeing yet. What we need is to tell people the program is there. So that's what I think makes more sense for utilization of those funds. And we've also talked, we're not sure about this yet, but we've talked about a potential expansion of a home area network pilot. These are neat little devices that you can get clipped to your meter and can actually feed information to your computer about the energy you're using. Those devices can also communicate with external entities. So currently PG&E is the person who holds the data access to those, but you can, I think you can work with third parties to get around that and possibly pave the way for things like demand response programs for residential customers, where the home can communicate with specific appliances, for example, and respond to a peak event. And then maybe so but. So we're currently operating a very small pilot to see how that works and to see if that can be a workaround in particular to not having smart meter data. And we may have an interest in expanding that as well. It's all longer than I thought. Are there any questions in any of this?
No? Seeing none. Thank you, Becky. Great. All right. Now for the really exciting part of the evening. Regulatory and legislative update. Beth, oh my gosh, look at that pregnant woman.
This is my last regulatory update for a little bit here, actually. So,
I just wanted to see you can stand up.
Don't consider yourselves off the hook. I have a very, very capable team who will be providing the regulatory and legislative update in a couple of months while I'm away. And you can't keep me away from this stuff because I actually do really like it. No comment directly. So the first item is I'm going to talk about two components of the long-term procurement plan proceeding that are just the 2012 long-term procurement plan proceeding, which is just wrapping up at this point in time. As Dawn mentioned in her summary of the contracts, we have Scott Blazing, who's going to be working really in depth on the 2014 long-term procurement plan, and so everything old is new again. We will be litigating a lot of similar issues in 2014 LTPP. For track 3, the long-term procurement plan is broken into 4 tracks this time around. So there was a decision in track 3 that was recently voted out. There are a couple of small revisions to the power charge and difference adjustment PCIA. That's the exit fee that our customers, the major exit fee that our customers pay. This requires the IOUs to reasonably estimate the expected CCA departing loads of our customers during the planning horizon that the LTPP relates to. This is good news insofar as what they have said is that this needs to be based on the Commission's, the CEC's IPER plan, which is also a long-term planning document, and also based on CCA's binding notice of intent, which is actually a very irrelevant metric. We've never used a binding notice of intent. It's kind of been used more as a threat on the part of PG&E than a reasonable tool to use. The only issue with this is with the IPER is departing CCA load has never actually been reflected in the IPER. So We are working with the CEC to ensure that CCA loads are appropriately reflected there. And also there's some additional language in this track 3 decision which really suggests that the IOUs need to reasonably estimate expected CCA departing load. So they do have to incorporate this. The impact of this, once CCA loads are anticipated in this long-term procurement plan, that means that the investor-owned utilities will not be procuring on behalf of CCA customers. That means over the long run, you would see the PCIA cost roll off. However, that doesn't help our customers at this moment. Right now, it's just a pretty significant subsidy that our customers are paying to PG&E. And so that is reasonably good news. We had asked for more, we had asked for additional clarity, but this is an incremental step, and one of the positive points of this is, you know, as we are continuing to be involved in these types of proceedings, the profile of CCA issues has gained more traction and more understanding, so that has been very helpful. Also in this decision, there is the cost allocation mechanism, which relates to resources that are supposed to serve a system or local area reliability need that are brought online by the investor-owned utilities. The decision is helpful insofar as, similarly, procurement undertaken for the bundled loads of the utilities should not be receiving CAM. That sounds intuitive, but it's actually a new clarification to the rules. One challenging area, however, has been that we had said, you know, the commission really needs to take into consideration the new resources, long-term resources that CCAs are bringing online that support local or system area reliability needs. And we provided extensive data. We provided our integrated resource plan and a lot of other information in this proceeding, but still the decision came out saying that, to our knowledge, ESPs, so direct access.
Can you help us with the acronyms a little bit?
Sure, yeah, okay. CAM is cost allocation mechanism, and that is a mechanism by which a investor-owned utility enters into a long-term contract with a new facility. They take the entirety of those costs of those facilities, back out a very low power cost, basically the brown power cost in a sort of forward strip, and the commission determines that the rest of the costs associated with that contract are actually resource adequacy costs. Those resource adequacy costs are then allocated to our customers on a pro rata basis, and we receive a sliver of these, of the resource adequacy value for our own RA portfolio at basically a very high cost to our customers. That is the consequence of this. This is a quickly growing component of our portfolio mix, which is disconcerting. I believe right now it's around 15%, if I'm remembering the figures. And it's growing quickly. This has a significant impact on our procurement autonomy. Also, we don't have any certainty on when these CAM-approved projects are coming online. There are no assurances provided by the investor-owned utility that they will actually be there and we can rely upon them. So in essence, we have to over-procure on resource adequacy. When the RA shows up, we have to sell it off, basically at a loss.
What's causing that growth?
The Public Utilities Commission is causing that growth. The issue is that this really stems back to how the direct access market works. So direct access is kind of a cousin to community choice aggregation. It's where basically large entities elect to go to a different energy service provider than PG&E. Often these are with 2-3 year contracts, and it's at a reasonably low price. Often new facilities are not brought online for those customers. So there's a sentiment at the commission and by the utilities that kind of that certain of these entities are not carrying their own weight for purposes of resource adequacy and making sure that there are new resources being brought online. But this has been extended also to CCA, which is in a very different position since we're procuring on a long-term basis. So what we're dealing with is an issue of basically regulatory lag, where the commission hasn't yet come up with a solution for how to address entities like Marin Clean Energy, which is responsibly procuring on a long-term basis for its customers. So that is kind of how we got to where we are. There are openings for sort of litigating this into the future in the next LTPP and continuing this conversation. And also, I think there are really significant openings to have this issue addressed because of several other changes that are happening on the RA front. This is a much longer answer than I really like to give, but it's a complex and incredibly important issue.
Yeah.
There are a couple of new RA requirements that are coming down the path here. One is a multi-year forward RA, so that means that all load serving entities are going to have to procure on a couple of year ahead basis for resource adequacy. So that should be solving the concern about CAM. And then also there's going to be some flexible capacity requirement obligations for all load serving entities. So to the extent that that is a concern of the commission, that's going to already be addressed in other resource adequacy rules. Because in the end, what we would like to see is just reasonable resource adequacy rules that we can comply with, rather than insufficient resource adequacy rules that result in PG procuring expensive resources on our behalf. And the ones that have been granted CAM treatment are primarily gas-fired facilities. So to the extent that we can procure from a renewable resource that has similar or the same attributes, that would be the path that we'd like to go down. So, the track 3 final decision has a little bit of good and a little bit of bad, but at least CCA issues were highlighted and addressed. So we're looking forward to continuing down this path on sort of bringing exit fees in line for our customers. Track 4, another track of this proceeding, specifically relates to the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station. We generally do not become involved in proceedings that do not have an impact in the PG service territory. However, in this case, because of the scale of the impact, San Onofre is 2,200 megawatts, and it, as you all are aware, has gone offline. The impact of how replacement procurement is addressed will have a very significant impact on community choice aggregation in the Southern California service territories, because it can result in significant procurement on behalf of those future CCAs. It's a really significant barrier to entry. So what the proposed decision does is it authorizes up to 1,200 megawatts of new resources. So it's not a replacement of the entirety, but it is a significant replacement of a resource that was fundamentally used only for bundled ratepayers. And for those 1,200 megawatts, CAM treatment is actually authorized for all of those resources. And so there aren't many protections in place there for ensuring that whatever these special characteristics are that SOM's provided are actually going to be reflected in these replacement contracts. And so we've had significant concerns there, but as you'll see, our concerns have been essentially dismissed. So we drafted an extensive legal brief on this issue that was about 60 pages long. And all 3 of the utilities asked that our brief be stricken from the record. And so I actually take this as a badge of honor, because it means that clearly we're on the right track. And the commission actually the proposed decision essentially agrees with the investor-owned utilities, saying that, oh, our brief on cost allocation mechanism issues is, in their words, not relevant. And actually, they use the phrase a waste of time, which I thought was quite significant. The topics that are irrelevant include legal background to CAM and how CAM initially was used really in exigent circumstances, really emergencies where there was an immediate need on the system that needed to be fulfilled. The commission essentially ordered a utility to fill that need as quickly as possible so that they would maintain grid stability. This has grown over time and is now sort of a policy tool of the commission. Also, we discussed extensively the specific legal requirements of applicability of CAM to CCAs. That portion was also stricken from the record. And also our indications of what a significant impact this CAM would have on the development of CCA in Southern California. So I think that it's a challenge because there are no CCAs in Southern California at this time. So we're sort of fighting the fight for something that is, in the commission's view, hypothetical, but in our view it's not hypothetical, but it will end up being irrelevant if you don't have a regulatory structure in place that allows for the existence of CCA and choice. So that is, it has been interesting. And in a way, I think that we are hindered a little bit because, in essence, this decision is really more leveled at the direct access community, and by treating direct access and CCA the same in this way, if the commission wants to hinder the ability of direct access to operate, they're fighting that fight for themselves, but to preclude CCA is where we have a really significant problem. So we are, this is a proposed decision. It's going to be voted on next Thursday. But hopefully, as we continue to litigate these issues, there's some indications that song, San Onofre, is quite different in its characteristics than Diablo Canyon, which is the nuclear resource of PG&E up here in the PG&E service territory. So hopefully for MCE customers, we'll not see a long-term negative impact on this, but I think that for CCA, it is just a step backwards. But it goes along with the many steps forward that we've been making, so kind of have to take the good with the bad.
Kate, you mind?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
I'm sorry, could you just give me a little bit of a bigger picture
Sure.
overview here? What is track 3 and track 4?
Sure.
What is, I'm getting lost a little bit in the weeds here.
Yeah, I was not planning on going into that just because
I'm happy to make it as broad and general
okay,
as you could.
the long-term procurement plan is a really significant proceeding where all of the long-term procurement planning for each of the utilities happens every 2 years. So it's these 10-year plans that are adopted every 2 years. The tracks are broken down into system plans, the entire footprint of the investor-owned utility service territory, bundled plans where you're backing out the bundled loads of the investor-owned utilities, so they're procuring for their bundled customers, what those needs are. Also, track 3 was essentially procurement rules, and track 4 was a special proceeding for songs because it is a unique need in Southern California for this LTPP cycle. So they are incredibly involved and complex proceedings. They're also very important. I think that one of the challenges that we face is that it requires a really heavy lift and a lot of manpower, which the investor-owned utilities have in spades, and we are small. So to get change in these proceedings is quite a challenge. Actually, in the PG&E general rate case, just so you have a sense, the figures for their combined legal and regulatory staff is 500 full-time employees. So,
But just so I mean, so every 2
Yeah.
years, the Public Utilities Commission revisits its long-term procurement plan.
Yep.
Right? And that we are obliged to provide input, or it's in our interest to provide input to this process. Otherwise, we're subject to whatever regulations they let out.
yeah.
And track 3 and track 4 refer to specific bundles of energy that we are going to be obliged to provide, I don't know, capacity, if that's the right word there, but in some way provide for.
Yeah, so it actually, the way that it works is we aren't sort of under the purview of the LTPP. It's only in the investor-owned utilities. But, you know, it's sort of the way, how the procurement rules apply to the investor-owned utilities have direct impacts on us as a community choice aggregator. So we're not required to provide information. We're not required to participate in the LTPP. We don't have any procurement obligations that come out of the LTPP because all of our, you know, Senate Bill 790, Assembly Bill 115, all of the enabling legislation for CCA says that we have, you as our board have autonomy over the procurement decisions that we make. That's why we have our integrated resource plan update, things like that. So that's our version of the long-term procurement plan. And if CCA load isn't appropriately reflected in the investor-owned utilities procurement planning, then that can lead to exit fees and costs that are borne by CCA customers. So, you know, PCIA being over $13 million this coming year, it's we have to be able to be involved and protect our interests, both for our own customers and for CCA at large, to let CCA, you know, exist without these really significant barriers to entry. Yes, Director.
But can we pick our battles a little more selectively than challenging everything? Could we let, for example, the songs issue go and work harder on the other ones that are a little more pertinent to us? Maybe we might get a little more traction than trying to stretch ourselves in a thin manner, especially when we're a few against 500.
Yeah, and we actually already do. And what we try to focus on is core issues for MCE specifically and community choice aggregation generally. These major initiatives have included, you know, ensuring that the long-term procurement plans reflect track 4. As I said, for songs, that's sort of a unique situation just because of the significant impact, one, on the methodology and how CAM applies, and also two, the significant chilling effect that I think it's going to have in the Southern California service territories. We would greatly benefit from having additional CCAs out there and fighting the fight. Unfortunately, there are a lot of places where we just simply need to be involved. You know, energy storage, those, how do you appropriately reflect CCAs in energy storage? You know, we are only doing the generation function. The investor utilities are serving the whole host of functions, and so we were involved there. We received specific treatment for CCAs that specifically related to our generation role, but it was still a heavy lift. We just have to be involved. Resource adequacy is another example, long-term procurement plan, general rate case. Those are major proceedings. And other competitive concerns, for example, the green tariff, we've been very involved there because if PG&E or the other investor utilities are cross-subsidizing their products, that puts CCA at a significant disadvantage. So I guess that is the very, very long-winded way of saying we're constantly prioritizing and reprioritizing. And we are by no means involved in the whole suite of proceedings before the Public Utilities Commission.
And if I could add one thing to that, I think I would just echo that there are a lot more proceedings that we choose not to be involved with than the ones we choose to be involved with. And a lot of the good news that we reported at the beginning of the meeting is due to the efforts of the regulatory team. You know, the GHG costs being finally added to the bill is something we've been pushing for over a year. The PCIA, that exit fee or departing load charge that we see now, it's still pretty high. But if we hadn't advocated at the CPUC for a revisiting of that formula 2 years ago, it would be even higher, probably double what it is now. And that comes out to, you know, what is our competitive advantage and how much are our customers paying for energy. So there is real value in the participation, but you're right, we have to constantly reprioritize where's the best value for our limited time.
Yeah, funny.
And so a lot of times, you know, we'll take a look, for example, at PG&E's general rate case. This past time around, and Jeremy's really taken the lead on this, as we focused on about 3 very specific issues within the general rate case. And so we parse out larger proceedings into smaller components and just fight the fight on those smaller components. And to the extent that there are other interests fighting for something that we're in alignment with, a lot of times we'll just let them fight the fight and say, we agree. So, you know, it's just the strategies that you use for being a small entity and a regulatory structure really tailored for much larger entities.
Beth, I've got a question for you, which is, and I'm not questioning our participation in this proceeding. I think if there really is a choice that we have to make frequently, because in a lot of ways we're trying to create a culture shift at the PUC. So I think it's an ongoing decision between focusing on the really obvious specific that does involve us, and then picking our strategic battles in areas that may not be quite so obvious, so that we try to move the culture, which is daunting. But I have a question on this, on the fact that our brief was struck. Do you believe that, if you can divine, that was because we don't have a long-term procurement plan requirement for us as a CCA? Or is it because there's no CCAs that exist in Southern California, or some mix? Do you have a sense of it? The latter.
I think that to the extent that there were existing or very close CCAs in the Southern California territories, I think that we would have seen a very different level of attention paid. And I think that is a little bit short-sighted on the part of the commission, because if you are making these types of decisions at this point in time, it's really difficult to move the needle, and it creates a much more significant barrier. But actually, this brings me to, I was going to talk about cap and trade, but my thunder's been stolen both by Dawn and by Jamie, so I'm not going to touch on this. But I actually do have other wonderful news. So today in the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Subcommittee number 2 on Resources, Environmental Protection, Energy, and Transportation, there was an important vote that was made on the state of California budget that would, that it now includes a couple of additional CPUC higher level energy division positions and a 2-year administrative law judge position. All 3 of these are specifically related to community choice aggregation.
Fantastic. Wow.
So this was voted out of subcommittee. As you all know, the path is very, very long and challenging, but this is exactly sort of what we're fighting for. How do we gain the resources to actually have the commission address CCA concerns? We found bandwidth issues to be a very serious issue. So this was voted out just today, around noon. The next steps there are going to be that it's going to go to the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on April 30th, and so this is just a major component that we're going to be focusing on this year. It would be just a great benefit for CCAs throughout the state to really have the resources for the commission to look at CCA now that it is something that exists with MCE and with Sonoma. So we have been working hard on this. We had letters of support from the City of Richmond, so thank you very much to the City of Richmond. Lean, Monterey Bay, Full Energy, Santa Barbara, Sunnyvale, Climate Protection Campaign, and so we are really looking forward to the next steps here. We hope that in today's budget meeting, it was a vote only, there was no discussion on the matter. It was a staff recommendation to approve it, and it was approved. So I think that this really does demonstrate that, you know, all the work, all the groundwork that we've been doing, all the proceedings that we've been involved in, and even all of the losses that we've had have fed into a moment where we have an opportunity to actually have resources available to address these issues. So that has been a really significant bright spot. So we look forward to keeping you posted on that.
That's terrific.
And that is, barring any questions, that's been my great.
Questions? That's great news, Beth, and really great updates. Any questions, anybody? Super, all right. Board of the staff matters? Yes?
One thing, recently in the Transportation Authority of Marin, the staff developed a double-sided list of alphabetically organized acronyms and interpretations. And I think it would be really useful for us to have something like that that's being developed on an ongoing basis, and that also would be augmented by a glossary. Because there are a lot, it's a very complicated area. You guys breathe it every day, but if you don't breathe it every day and only do once or twice a month, it's just hard to keep up.
Yep.
So that would, I think that would be a really useful tool for me and probably the other board members.
Didn't we have something like that in our board retreat materials, actually?
There is. So I have this developed, but it can be, you know, there's a lot of information that is in the new director binders and at our annual retreat, but that is something that I already have developed. And so I'm happy to have that included in the next board packet as just sort of just part of the board packets. This is the sort of a standalone item so folks can refer back to it. But it is an acronym soup, and I really apologize for that. So
That's great. No, we can't be reminded too often.
No.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion along those lines, since these meetings are filmed and we have members of the public, it might be a good idea when you do the presentations to try to explain those acronyms.
Okay.
Because it will just be a good reminder.
Yep.
And so that might be helpful too, because we do have public people watching on TV as well.
Okay.
Great. Super.
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to have my team do that.
Great. Super. Anything else? All right, seeing that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.